Hello. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Eu vou chamar
Tem
primeiro
salas
você.
vazias aqui.
Isso, vou
Deixa.
chamar primeiro
Depois
você.
o Jeff chama.
Isso. É, vou chamar um de cada vez. Deixa. Vazio assim. Não tá tão vazio assim. So, good morning to everyone. It's finally our first action day today. This is our first panel. Uh, Time to act. Showcase incentivizing upscaling deforestation conversion-free supply chains. There'll be a historical day, a lot of announcements, a lot of commitments, a lot of things that we will present today. The people from YouTube, so welcome you online as well. So first of all, I will bring Mauricio Voivovic, our CEO from WWF Brazil, to make our opening session. So thanks a lot, guys, to be here. Have a nice first action day.
Hello, good morning to all of you. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you everyone that is also following online. This is great. We've been working hard for a long time to organize this DCF Day. The whole idea behind this, the whole set of events that we're having today is that this is the COP of implementation. That's what the presidency has been saying. We are all focused on demonstrate that it's possible, it's doable, and it's better to speed up the work on climate change. And on forest, we've been, how many years? 2 decades at least, discussing zero deforestation commitments, right? And Jeff has been part of this very much, all of us been engaged on this. So now at COP30 is no longer to present long-term commitments, promises anymore. This is the time for action. And so the idea for the day is really to demonstrate that there is a lot of action happening on DCF, a lot of good solutions that are happening, and we want to demonstrate that. Before I go through, I also want to make a little disclaimer and actually ask for apologies for this first panel. We have our policy in WWF Brazil of gender balance in any panel that we do. And unfortunately, this first one has no gender balance. And we try hard anyway. There has been reasons for that, but I want to recognize that and make my formal apologies related to that. I'm not going to go into the importance of getting to zero deforestation, all the global tipping points. There has been many discussions around that here last week. But as I said, it's really time to move from promises to action. And what's happening here today and what's happening in the action agenda, all the discussions about deforestation is actually feeding and providing inputs to the formal negotiations. And we at WWF, we are fully engaged on this. We are very happy to see that happening. So there's a ministerial meeting today on forest that will discuss what is being called the forest roadmap. Lula has asked for a forest roadmap along with a transitioning away fossil fuel roadmap, as well as Marina Silva and the president of COP, André Correa do Lago. So these links between what we are discussing here and the formal negotiations and what's happening inside the negotiations is key, so that everything that goes along the same lines. A forest roadmap in the negotiations can be very important to demonstrate what's the pathway for the next couple of years to get to halting and reverse deforestation by 2030, as it was decided at COP28 in Dubai. And we'll be presenting along the day several DCF cases. All of them are great, that demonstrate that it's possible, it's better for business, and of course, much better for forest. and that can be done at large scale. But among all of these cases, there is one that is special that I want to start the day highlighting one of those cases. And we've been waiting for a long time to see that happening, and has a major importance in the whole debate, which is the first time ever there has been a DCF beef shipment from Brazil to China. So that's the first formal shipment, fully DCF with verification, strong criteria, that has been sold from Marfrig. And, oh, sorry, I always forget the new name. Yeah, Marfrig is easier to say. MEBRF, I'm sorry, Paulo. But I really want to congratulate the leadership goal of Marfrig on doing this. Marfrig has been advancing fast on getting to zero deforestation in all supply chain, and that demonstrates that it's possible, it's better for the business, and it's possible to do at scale. But selling to China is also really symbolic. For how many years a lot of us listened from players that, oh, come on, China is never asking any sustainability criteria, right? So that has been the conversation. But now China is really interested to get DCF goods, not only from Brazil, also from Indonesia, Colombia, DRC, other places. And this can be a game changer in the whole discussion. So we are very happy with this announcement, the first DCF beef shipment from Brazil to China happened the very, couple of days, weeks ago. Paulo, congratulations to you. I'm sure you'll speak more about it in your participation here. So thank you all for joining. Thanks, Pablo, for putting a lot of energy on all of the day today, all the team as well in WWF Brazil and many other WWF offices, Jean as well, that have been putting a lot of energy to organize everything here. Thank you all. And now, actually, I'm calling Jeff Mulder. Oh, Jean first, sorry. Yeah, Jean, you first.
Thank you very much. It's a really great news, actually. This is the first concrete result of an effort since 2016 to create this China Sustainable Meat Declaration, and with the China Meat Association, that we want to also give a tribute to that work from the China Meat Association here. Thank you. And Yixing here present, yeah. Hello. So I will present very quickly a small context of why we are doing all this very quickly. And if you, yes. And let's go to the next slide. So basically, we know that agriculture and land use change is responsible for a very significant part of emissions, something like between 15 to 20% or even more, depending on how you compute it. But from the land use change emissions from agriculture, 3 commodities are responsible for up to half of these emissions. And it is cattle, soy, and palm oil. And so we're having a clear target on how we can make a drastic difference, and we have proof that this is critical to achieve the 1.5 commitment of the climate agenda. So here, these are 2 plates that are quite the same, but one is business as usual and is emitting 171 kilogram of CO2, and the same plate without deforestation is emitting 12 kilogram per CO2. Same plates, same goods, and we're having here the data. I'm not going into it, but that is what makes the difference. And that has an impact, immediate impact on food production itself. So here we know the monsoon system that's in Southeast Asia that's been balanced. In Congo Basin, there is monsoon system also to the Sahel region from the Congo Basin. And here we have a massive monsoon from the Amazon, from here, going straight to Argentina, that allows you to produce food. So this is critical for the future of the global food system. And we cannot continue to undermine the very basis of all our economy by not stopping deforestation. Unfortunately, there are lots of commitments, and here is a bit of an analysis of the commitments of corporate commitments, and we see that there is still a lot of gap between declaration, commitments, and action, and also on the ambition of these declarations. So there's been a very good assessment here from the Forest to 500, but we can take as a reference for that. Lot of room for progress. So what we are willing to do is to, when you're having people going through a bridge, sometimes you have to have the first person to go through the bridge and then the rest comes along. So what we are willing to show is showcasing proofs of concept, and we have listed a series of very concrete advances in transparency systems, in shipments, that demonstrate not only that it's feasible to have deforestation and conversion-free trade at scale, it's already happening, basically. And what we want to do is to show and demonstrate from here, beyond this COP, taking all these examples and make them spread among the same commodity in different places, spread among different commodities in the same place, and really make it slowly business as usual. If it's feasible for me, it's feasible for you. The solution that happens for cocoa in Ecuador and the cocoa in Ghana, they can learn from each other and make it something like business as usual. And so this is what we are now planning to do. These are the examples that we have mapped all over the planet, and we were quite strict in this selection. We were painfully not selecting some of these elements because it was not totally proven. And so the shipment of today has been audited. When we call about proof of concept, we need to have the proof, yes? And so this is why we could have a double number of cases, and we intend to have at least 3 times that number of cases by mid next year. So we are having here a full report on each of these cases and what you can expect. And please just take it. I will keep it after my talk a bit more so you can take it. And well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. It was a fantastic presentation, a big report. I hope if you can download and see how many cases that we prepared. So just go back. It's our QR code. For our panel right now, I will call our moderator. It's Agnet. Agnet is the conservation director at WWF Denmark and Greenland. She has extensive experience in the development sector with a focus on indigenous people, human rights, governance, health, food security, education, and energy. And she worked a lot of in post-conflict context. So please come, Agnet. Thank you to be here. We have in our panel as well Jeff Mulder. Jeff Mulder is the director from Accountability Framework Initiative since in 2016. Has a background in landscape ecology and community-based land and use planning. In prior roles, Jeff led Rainforest Alliance Science and Impacts team to work as a researcher and policy advisor on sustainability, agriculture, and biodiversity conservation in Latin America. Also, he likes to cooking and go on family bikes trips. So welcome, Jeff. I will call Ulf Johansson. I like to say, okay, write your name. He's the Global Raw Materials Manager at IKEA since September 2023. Ulf is here? It's not up? Oh, okay. So he's coming. At the next, I will call Paulo Pianese. He's the Global Sustainability Director from MBRF, leading the integration of sustainability practice and corporate objectives. He's an economist from Unicamp and postgraduate in quality and specialization in retail management. So welcome, Paulo Pianese. I'd like to call Luis Menezes. Luis Menezes is the Director of Program Brazil in Global Canopy. He is specialized in sustainability and bioeconomy and supports our financial sectors and engagement on deforestation risk. So thanks a lot to be here. I will pass the word to Agnet to moderate this panel. So thanks a lot. Oh, to Jeff Milder. Yes, thanks a lot, guys.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to moderate this panel. My name is Jeff Milder. I'm director of the Accountability Framework Initiative. I'd like to just add a brief perspective to the context that Mauricio and Jean already shared. 9 years ago, back in 2016, companies had already begun making commitments to no deforestation and respect for human rights and commodity supply chains. And several of us NGOs who are working on these issues said, well, this is great, but how are these commitments going to be implemented? And how are we going to know whether we're successful? What are the metrics? What are the implementation pathways? And so a group of us came together. Mauricio was part of the founding group and formed what is now the Accountability Framework Initiative, and basically created a common global rule book on how to set strong commitments, take action, and report progress around this transition to eliminate deforestation and human rights abuses from supply chains. And this framework has been used by hundreds of companies. It's been embedded deeply in the enabling environment. And the results, as Jean showed on the slide, are an indication that we have made a lot of progress. So we are in a very different place than we were then. At the same time, 2025 is a milestone year for this agenda. Many companies set 2025 as a target for eliminating deforestation, and we didn't completely get there. And so we have this moment where we need to reaffirm and re-energize this agenda. We need to take stock of what we've accomplished and where we've fallen short. And we need to set a path going forward so that we continue to act in ways that build on success while addressing remaining challenges. And so our panel today, we have a great set of experts and perspectives to give us a big picture on this pivot moment and how we move forward. So just a quick preview of how we're going to do this. We'll begin by really hearing the big picture, and I'm going to invite Luis, who leads Global Canopy in Brazil, to share a bit about the work that they've been doing to track progress and performance towards DCF. And then we'll be looking up close at some of the solutions that have actually been deployed, both on the demand side and on the supply side of global value chains. And then we'll have, at the end, we'll sort of have a collective think about where we need to go next. So here we go. Luis, I'm going to start with you. Global Canopy has played such a critical role providing for us a barometer of progress on this transition toward DCF commodities with initiatives such as Forest 500 and now Floresta 250 in Brazil. So tell us, what has Global Canopy learned about progress as well as major gaps in this transition to DCF?
Thanks, Jeff. And I also want to thank WWF and Accountability Framework to invite us through this panel and to bring a little bit of the perspective how to engage financial sector in DCF supply chains. At Global Canopy, our mission is to change the market forces that are destroying nature, and we do this by providing open access data, tools, and guidance to companies, financial institutions, governments, and civil societies to build supply chains and portfolios that are free of deforestation, conversion, and human rights violations. To bring a perspective on the performance of how most influential companies and FIs that have the greatest exposure to deforestation risks are performing, I want to bring some insights of two flagship assessments that Global Canopy has done over the course of the last decade and one more recently, which is the Forest 500 and the Floresta 250. This last one focuses on the Brazil cattle sector supply chain. According to the 2025 Forest 500, 150 financial institutions provide almost $9 trillion to companies linked to deforestation. If we zoom this to Brazil, the Floresta 250 assessment identified as of 2024, $100 billion flowing into upstream cattle supply chain companies. And 1/3 of this finance comes through credits and loans, but the 2/3 comes from capital market instruments such as bonds, representing about $60 billion in bonds in 2024, and approximately $8 billion in equity. And so big corporate players of the sector are largely financed more and more by capital markets than credits. And while rural credit in Brazil has a strict social environmental requirements set by the central bank, and this was decisive, has a decisive role in reducing deforestation in the Amazon since 2008, capital market instruments are largely unregulated. And evidence shows that parts of this finance is still supporting deforestation and human rights violations in the Amazon and Cerrado. So what our assessments have told us is that even for both companies and FIs, we are far from aligning supply chains and portfolios with DCF goals. And some of the findings I want to bring is around 3% of 500 assessed companies have strong deforestation-free commitments for all high-risk commodities. So that means that 97% of companies still fail to act adequately, especially in human rights and beef. And this is the weakest commodity with traceability and deforestation-free guarantees there. Another study is that just 22% of these companies have commitments covering both leather and beef. And only 5% in leather and 13% in beef publicly disclose any DCF verified volume. If we see a bit the financial institutions providing finance to these 500 companies, 40% have deforestation policies. But if we look into the Brazilian cattle sector, this drops to 19% only with deforestation policies. And only 13% of the financial institutions require clients to have traceability systems. 18% monitor compliance for at least one of these commodities, and only 3 out of 150 FIs monitor and screen clients for compliance in all high-risk commodities. And just 21% have any procedures to engage with non-compliant clients, right? So overall, despite pockets of progress, most of financial institutions remain far from aligning their portfolios with the CF goals. And this is why Global Canopy, alongside partners like WWF, has been strengthening deforestation-free finance approaches, right? Providing company-level data, but also demonstrating where stronger policy coverage, traceability requirements, and systemic engagement can translate commitments into measurable outcomes. The deforestation-free finance roadmap that was recently adapted to the Brazilian supply chain and launched last October provides practical step-by-step guide for institutions to manage their portfolios and eliminate deforestation. So the roadmap is already being used by Brazilian and global FIs, strengthening policies, improving due diligence, and shifting capital allocation. The data shows that slow, but there is undeniable progress, but far from the level we need, that the world needs to have in scale. So we see that it's not a lack of awareness, but a lack of implementation. And the next step is turning commitments into actionable policies, embedding into investment process, and linking them to real financial consequences. And if we anchor action on material risks, strengthen traceability, and harmonize expectations, we can move from individual commitments to systemic transition.
Thank you, Luis. That was a great overview, and I think it's fair to say we have quite a ways to go in terms of aligning capital broadly with the deforestation-free agenda, but you pointed to some examples that already exist that can be emulated, and it's very clear what financial institutions need to do. So that provides us a basis to move forward. So in addition to finance, of course, the demand side of the supply chain is another key driver of the transition to DCF supply chains. And so we want to dig into that driver a bit more. And so, Agnete, I'm going to ask you to share a bit about the experience of Denmark, which has been at the forefront of demand for DCF commodities. And so I'd like to invite you to talk a bit about some of the companies in Denmark that have made commitments to DCF, what it took to establish those commitments, and how far those companies have come in actually fulfilling them.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think from a Danish perspective, we have been working very hard, as you say, to establish the demand side. Denmark is a very big producer of pork and dairies, and it means we have a very big deforestation footprint globally, and especially here in Brazil due to the soy import. So our first strategy was to work with the feed producers directly, which turned out to be a little bit difficult because the whole discussion about the pricing and who's paying and the regulation not following. So we pushed for the next steps and actually had some very thorough discussions with the dairy sector and the pork producers. And by now, actually, Arla, who is actually the world's biggest dairy producer, has set targets for verified DCF by 2025. And the Danish Crown, which is Europe's largest producer or processor of pork, has also set targets for 100% deforestation-free soy by 2027 and 2028. So we do see that there's a progress and that they're quite ambitious. I think the next steps is actually to ensure that it's possible for them to live up to the targets set. And right now they're quite dependent on credits and offsets because that's actually what is doable and feasible. So, with the progress now that is in terms of traceability, we see that there might be an opportunity to actually move in to a shift to ensuring that the physical import they use is verified.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you a follow-up so you can get a second round of applause in a moment. So I wanted to ask a bit about kind of the ecosystem of commitment setting and peer pressure, and whether you see Denmark as a leader being in a role of being able to drive similar commitments from other companies, how you engage throughout the European market or elsewhere to really set an example and drive others to follow that example.
Yeah, thank you for the follow-up question. No, I think it's important. Actually, I forgot to say that these two companies they actually account for 60% of the soy import in Denmark. So it's substantial of the feed-related soy import, and the feed-related soy import is 95% of the soy import in Denmark. So it's quite big players. In Denmark, we have also been working as WWF and with a partner called Ethical Trade Denmark to establish a sustainable soy alliance with a lot of different companies interested in this transition, so to speak. And we are working with similar initiatives around Europe to push this agenda forward. And also having some of those really big players in that initiative is important because they also have facilities around Europe, and just by being a part of that ecosystem, they can push change. So we bring the stakeholders together to share experiences and challenges and their ways forward, and pushing each other, as you said, as pushing the bar a bit up.
Great, thank you very much. So we've heard about demand drivers, you've heard about finance drivers, but of course, none of this will halt deforestation without transforming business closer to the ground. And in this regard, traders and meat companies are absolutely critical players. And so we're glad to have Paulo here today representing MBRF, which is a recent merger between Marfrig and BRF. So both of those companies, both of those legacy companies, had clear commitments to DCF, reflecting key elements of the accountability framework, such as a 2025 target date and broad coverage across the relevant biomes. So I wanted to ask you, has your company achieved these targets? And also, how have your customers and investors reacted to the fact that your company has these targets and is progressing towards them?
First of all, thank you, WWF, for the invitation, especially because, as Mauricio said, it's a very, very special day because we achieved a big milestone. As Mauricio said, is the first shipment of zero deforestation beef from Brazil to China, actually a formal shipment. So that shows that it's totally possible to do that. So investors, clients, consumers are looking for policies, commitments, and practices that we really can balance production and conservation. It is totally possible to do that. But to do that, it is important to understand a little bit the context of the cattle production around the world, especially in Brazil. But before that, just to talk a little bit about the company, MBRF, as you said, is a merge between Marfrig, a big cattle beef producer, and BRF. BRF is big animal protein, industrialized and fresh poultry and pork products. Actually, we are the second largest company globally, and we are present. We have operations in North America, South America, Europe, North Africa, China, Middle East. So we have more than 70 facilities spread out around the world. So we have a big responsibility because our products achieve more than 120 countries around the world. So what we can do to establish a zero deforestation commitment, how to put in place this strategy. And it is important to mention that only MBRF operates from a perspective of zero deforestation and zero conversion in Brazil. Only one. And there are more than 1,000 companies operating or producing beef in the Brazilian market, especially supplying the domestic market. So there is a big challenge for us because we operate in a spot market, and then every animal, every raw material that I cannot purchase because it's not in compliance with our purchase policy, other companies are going to do that. So, but to do that, we understand that it is important to speak the same language of the producers. And in Brazil, there are more than 2.5 million cattle producers. 2.5 million cattle producers. 7% of those producers are smallholder producers, and they are not have access to financial market, or they don't have the conditions to support or to finance the transition, to put in place on the ground the technology and the way to transform or to change their production in a sustainable way. So, about seven years ago, we launched a program called Marfrig Verde Mais, or Marfrig Green Plus program, in which we went to speak to the producers. What we can do to transform your production? Which we have been learning is I cannot speak about sustainability or environment or about conservation with producers, because this language, it is not the same language that they speak. The language that they speak is about how to make their business profitable. That's the point. But to make their business profitable is the same that to implement the tools and the way that to transform their production in a sustainable way. Because we are talking about integration between crop and livestock production. We are talking about how to intensify the pasture management to put more animal in the same place. And then I have no pressure to open new native vegetation areas. We are talking about how to improve genetics to make shorter the time that the animals are ready to be slaughtered. We are talking about how to supplement the animal feed to improve the quality of the animal. So we have the same language, but one side we talk about things that they are not interested in hear about, and the other side, every time that we are approaching them, we are talking about something that they are not. It's not the same language that he then would like to hear about. So, with this approach, we have been working a lot because we established a zero deforestation and a zero conversion in 2008, and our policy in all biomes in Brazil is according with accountability framework, because we cannot purchase any animal from legal Amazon in Brazil with the cutoff data 2008 that has some kind of deforestation, despite legal or illegal deforestation. And for other biomes, the commitment is 2020. So, to do that, we changed the approach. We changed the approach from just to exclude producers, and now the approach is how to understand why the produce cannot be in our supply chain, and then we can support these producers to transform their production, and then we can put this producer in our supply chain. Doing this is possible to produce under a zero deforestation and a zero conversion commitment. But we have to convince more than 2 million producers. We have to engage more than 1,000 companies on this. So that's the big challenge. And the way to do that, we need to develop a new financial instrument to support this transition. That's the big challenge. It is important to have commitments from the demand side, as China, as UDR in Europe. It is important to have a huge law as Forest Code in Brazil, but we have to put in place one step ahead, is to develop the ways that could make feasible this transition. And to do that, we have to develop new financial instruments to support this transition.
Thank you, Paulo. I want to just underline one message from what you said, which is from the producer perspective, I think a big challenge and need in front of us is to make sure that the DCF and the forest conservation agenda is a shared agenda. If this is an exclusionary agenda, if this is an imposed agenda, we're not going to get where we need. And so I think your experiences are very interesting in that regard. So we have time for, those were sort of the easy questions. We were talking about what we've done, what we've accomplished. It was great to hear that. Now we're going to get to the hard question, because this panel is called Time to Act. So how do we need to act? And how do we need to act in the ways to unlock the parts of this agenda that have been most challenging? So we have about 2 or 3 minutes for each speaker. I'm going to ask each of you a follow-up about the future. And I'm going to begin by going back to you, Luis. The numbers you shared highlight that while we've made progress in aligning capital and financial markets, really quantitatively, the large majority of companies, financial institutions, are not aligned. And we're also missing some key segments of capital, like the bond market, as you mentioned. What are the top priorities to shift that over the next couple of years and to make this agenda one that investors feel like they need to pay attention to and that is important for their business?
I think I'd like to bring some insights that came up in a side event at PI in person last week in partnership with WWF, AFI, and IGCC. We brought together 25 financial institutions, Brazilian and global, but also civil society and technical organizations play in this area. And I set aside some 5 insights that are directly related to this, but I know that my time is short, so I probably pick 3. I think one that builds on what Paulo was saying about transition finance. And one thing I think that is important is financial materiality must guide engagement and capital decisions, right? So engagement is most effective when tied to real macro financial risks. So from export market access to rainfall variability, profitability losses, and climate supply chain disruptions. One important thing that came up from these leading FIs that are discussing the deforestation issue is that transition finance is replacing exclusion as the main lever. So asset exclusion from portfolios alone cannot shift land use systems. And so many investors are increasingly want to finance credible, time-bound transition plans tied based on clear commitments, implementation evidence, and measurable milestones. And I think that it's key, and perhaps one important lever that could be is collective action and how collaborative engagement can play a role in shifting companies in supply chains. So what came is that joint engagement combining global financial leverage, because it's where the most capital comes from, with local influence and credibility from domestic financial institutions, can help companies understand these expectations more clearly and respond with greater consistency there. So collaborative platforms for engagement between developed and emerging markets investors alongside civil society can reduce this fragmentation, harmonize these expectations, create strong, more consistent signals and incentives for companies on DCF. So I would stop here, but I think this collaborative engagement with international investors and local investors could create positive outcomes in the sectors, industries.
Thank you. And I think that's a really critical insight. You're talking about how the DCF agenda is packaged and how it's promoted, and that we're moving to doing that in a way that's about opportunity and is about transition. And a way it mirrors what we're hearing from the ground as well. So I think that's a great convergence. So I'm going to come back to you, Nate. And when talking about DCF supply chains, especially from the standpoint of, for instance, soy buyers in Europe, one thing that often comes up is, well, these supply chains are extremely long. Right now, they're pretty opaque. It's difficult to segregate materials. What do you see as the way through addressing the challenges we have now around traceability and segregation?
I think you're right that the chain is very long, but we also know that there are some very key players along the line, and I think we need to discuss with them and ensuring that they get the perspective all along the chain. I think it's for the. I mean, when I speak to the demand side in Denmark, it's very clear that they actually want to do the right thing. They have a wish. They have a wish to be on this journey, but they need to be aware of what is actually feasible and doable for them to set targets that is reflecting also what is possible on the ground and in terms of traceability, and to push the traceability agenda in the right direction in a doable way. So I think that's a very important aspect of it. And then I think the 2 other elements that I just needed to share. One is, of course, the cost sharing. As I mentioned before, we need to find out who's paying for the traceability and in what way that is possible. And then there's a whole issue about the policy issues and the enabling conditions and the things forcing the companies to move in the right direction, because it's in the end it's all a matter of cost and competition. Thank you.
And Paulo, I'm going to come back to you one last time. So we know that not all meat packers and other traders share MBRF's ambition. And we talked earlier in the session, Jean raised that we need to move from DCF products, isolated DCF products, to DCF commodities. How can we strengthen the business case to bring the entire sector on board?
That's the $1 million question. So $3 billion, yes, that's it. $3 billion. Well, I believe that it's going to be very, very, very challenging to do that if we not develop some public policies, mandatory policies in a country level. For example, Brazil has about 200 million cattle heads, and there is no national traceability system, a mandatory national traceability system in Brazil. Why? There is no, the cause of that, it is not technology. Technology, the way to do that are totally available. We developed a traceability system. By the end of this year, we are going to achieve 100% of traceability for direct and indirect suppliers. So it's totally possible to do that. But the big challenge is how to engage 1,000 companies, because it's very convenient for them to keep the way that we have currently. It's very convenient because about 75% of the beef demand is domestic demand. So, and there is no high level criteria in this country to purchase, to sell this production. So it's very difficult because there is a very huge sign from the domestic side or the domestic market to put under pressure those companies. On the other side, we have other big challenge. As I said, we have to engage the financial sector, because sometimes the best way to do that is when you put your hands on the pocket. And so if we have a very strict, a very huge, a very strong policy in terms of financing this industry from the financial market, especially from the domestic bank side, maybe we could change this reality in Brazil. If you do not have a very strong policy, if you do not have a very strong traceability tool to trace your whole supply chain, if you don't have a very clear, transparent, and public policy on this matter, you cannot access the credit or the financial market. Maybe this could be the only way to put in place a DCF cattle production in the whole country. That's my point of view. Working on this more than 15 years. So that's what I see, and it is a real big change. Because the three big companies, MBRF, JBS, and Minerva, those three companies has just 20-25% of share in this market. So we can have the most advanced tools on the ground. We could have the most huge and strong and restrict policies of cattle purchase. But we can change something. but it is not enough to put in place what we need to have a transition to a DCF production in the whole country. And it is possible to do that. That's the big point.
Thank you. All right. There was a lot here. I'm going to do my best to do a very quick wrap up, and then I'm going to pass it to Jella for a closing before we run out of time here. So I think this has been a fantastic kickoff to DCF Day, scene setting about what we've accomplished and what it means when we're saying time to act. So first of all, we have a lot of good examples to point to. We heard about the DCF shipment. We heard about the strong commitments from countries like Denmark and other countries in Europe and around the world. And so there's something very clear and very workable we can scale up around DCF products and DCF supply chains. At the same time, success involves reaching the entire market, and that includes what's sometimes called the leakage market. This is the market that is not participating in these voluntary initiatives. And I think we heard a couple of interesting examples how to do that. We heard about the need to ground this agenda, align this agenda more with the priorities of producers. We heard more about how to align this agenda with the language that investors speak and how they think about opportunity and how they think about risk, not just excluding assets, but thinking about financing the transition. And then we also heard about the critical role of public policy and that we still need to raise the floor, and that needs to be done on the supply side as well as the demand side. So let's have a final round of applause for our panel here. Thank you all again. And now I'd like to call up Jella from WWF Netherlands for some closing remarks.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, panelists, and thank you for joining this session on DCF. I think an important transition. And just what I would like to say is that to change a system like this, it takes enormous intelligence. And we have a lot of that here in the room. But it also takes wisdom. And wisdom is a quality of the heart. And wisdom asks us to be courageous. So who of you think that you are courageous enough to help make this change in your daily behavior? Do you push yourself to speak to that person outside your bubble? Yeah? Do you really, really, really do everything you can to help make this difficult change? Well, every day we have another chance. Let's not forget, we have only one Mother Earth. Thank you for this fantastic people to be warriors for this cause, and thank you for joining this session.